Fightcast. Trevor and Dylan here as always, but today we're joined by Dr. Jose Torres, the martial arts doc, and we've been talking about having Jose on for like a super long time. Since way before the new year, so glad that it finally worked out. And before we really get into like any kind of meaningful conversation, Jose, let's start with how you got into the career that you're in, and then we'll get into your martial arts journey after that. So how did you get started on this path of doing what you do?
First of all, thank you for having me.
Of course.
And for the most part, I didn't want to study chiropractic until I met my fiance, my wife. Originally, I wanted to study more medicine, like PMR, like physical medicine and rehab. But it wasn't until I chatted with chiropractic, sports chiropractor in my college town, that I saw like he did like more exercise, more hands-on approach compared to medicine. And it wasn't until I saw this, like I see myself doing this. And back then, like DPT, like Doctor and Physical Therapist, wasn't something big in Puerto Rico.
And medicine for pain management, or
PMR, like, which is physical medicine and rehab, like
okay.
you go like out of surgery, like it's gonna tell you like, yo, you said ACL repair. I'm gonna show you the exercise, but the problem with that, at least in Puerto Rico, like the doctor diagnosed you, and then the physical therapist did the exercise.
So did you start school in Puerto Rico for this?
Basically, I started my undergrad, yes.
Oh, cool.
But then my grad school, I did it in Texas, Dallas, for like 3.5 years, which is the program length. But yeah, I wanted to be a doctor, but also wanted the hands-on approach. So like, chiropractic is the best option at that time. Yeah, and it was that.
It's like a middle ground where
Yeah.
you can still be with the client and do the exercises with them. Okay,
basically, right now, I made a little bit of a mix between physical therapy and chiropractic, but yeah, like I wanted the hands-on approach. I didn't want to just diagnose you and like, bye.
Yeah, you seem as much into like the physical therapy as you are into like the chiropractic side of it. You see how they both go hand in hand for a good end result, not just one or the other.
Yeah, and be with the patient, like, not. Yeah, I just have one-on-one care.
Yeah,
so that's that was how.
Yeah, so you were born in Puerto Rico?
Yeah.
And at what age did you come to the U.S.?
I'm bad with like my age, but I was 2018.
Okay,
that's
cool.
for sure. Yeah, 2018,
Wow.
2019. So,
this
yeah,
first good says you're 16,
so
bro.
Like 2021.
Still quite recent then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
2021.
Wow, yeah.
So yeah, like I was like 21 years old. So yeah, like I went straight to Dallas, like for 3.5 years, like I said, with my wife, like my wife. So yeah.
Wow, so Dallas, you finish, and then you came up here specifically to do the practice, or was there another reason you moved up to Raleigh?
I followed my wife. She landed a pretty good job offer. So
Okay.
like, yeah, I'm a chiropractor. I can find a job anywhere else.
Yeah.
Right, you just do your thing wherever you go.
Yeah. Originally, like I wasn't planning on opening my own clinic.
But yeah, so you have your own clinic,
Yeah.
and like you also have like a part-time chiropractor job as well.
Yeah.
And then but you've been growing your PT clinic, and you definitely.
It's right down the street.
Yeah, it's right around the corner
Yeah.
from here actually. Yeah. What's
Yeah.
the address of it?
It's Spring Forest Road. It's like literally like 5 minutes from here.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, like it's pretty nice. And,
Yeah.
Cool, that's why we've been able to have you drop into a couple classes here.
Oh yeah, like
I
Jose
know.
just pops in for lunch.
I first met you like a year ago or so at Elevate when you first. Okay, so I assume that what you're doing now as the martial arts doc and trying to specialize more with helping fighters, I assume that came from your own training of martial arts and doing jiu-jitsu as well. So how did that start for you?
I was around like I was 15 years old, something like that. I had like bilateral knee pain in both knees. And I went to a big orthopedic surgeon in Puerto Rico in my hometown, and like he gave me a shitty diagnosis basically. Like, oh, you have degeneration of PCL. It's like you're gonna have to deal with it. Like, and I didn't like that. It's like
great advice. Like, deal with it.
And
my ex-girlfriend got that same diagnosis when she was quite young as well, and then she just thought she could not do physical activity. And like right when the pandemic started, she started doing yoga and all this other stuff, and she was like, it's strange, my pain started going away.
And it's frustrating, like that. Normally, medical system, you can tell healthcare and medical system, like it's like I want to empower my patients, and like I love doing martial arts. So if I can help people, like empower them and like help them learn about the body and be more robust and resilient while doing what they love. Like I don't want to take anybody away from doing martial arts, which what's my case. So yeah, those.
Yeah, I definitely can relate. Obviously, I had my knee rebuild as well, and luckily I was blessed to have a super good physical therapist after my surgery who guided me in the right ways, and I listened to everything she said. And then I started working with Greg once she was done with me to kind of strengthen everything. So I definitely can relate to wanting to empower your patients. I think that's really dope. And I saw that like on your Instagram yesterday. I think it was you posted that meme of Daniel Craig dancing, and I was like, dude, that is exactly me. They told me that I really probably wouldn't be able to continue training jiu-jitsu or like lifting or anything like that. And now I'm deadlifting 350 pounds. So I fuck with that heavily. So so you started doing jiu-jitsu at 15?
No. That was Taekwondo. I grew up
Okay.
did Taekwondo since I was 4 to 6 years old.
Okay.
Grew up my whole life, even college, undergrad, I had a scholarship for it. And I started doing jiu-jitsu in grad college in chiropractic school.
Okay.
It was 2 years in, and it's man, I want to get back to martial
And was that
arts.
in Puerto Rico as well?
No,
So it was in
Taekwondo
Dallas?
Taekwondo, yes, was growing up in Puerto Rico and everything, but the jiu-jitsu was first in Dallas.
I was gonna say I don't think it's very big there. Is
Yeah,
it?
what was
Like,
the
jiu-jitsu?
scene like? What was it like to look for martial arts in Puerto Rico? I mean, I hear a lot of times in South American countries, there's been a lot of traditional martial arts influence. There's a lot of karate, a lot of taekwondo. You see actually a strong representation from smaller island countries for traditional martial arts in bigger stages. Not so much sometimes Cuba for boxing, yeah. But I mean, you see the traditional styles there. You're just now starting to see some well-balanced MMA coming out of these areas. What was it like to look for? And did you grow up in a village, town, city?
No,
what is it
it's a
considered?
city. Yeah, I was
Okay.
south of San Juan, which is the capital. It's 10 minutes. It's still metro area. I would say it's one of the biggest. Caguas, which is 10, 15 miles south from San Juan, which is pretty big. But like you said, mostly in Puerto Rico, I don't speak for the whole Caribbean, but for most martial sport, it's only traditional martial arts. Like you said, and perhaps a little bit of boxing. There's not a big wrestling culture.
No, almost none.
Yeah,
Yeah, you don't see it represented in grappling at all.
No,
There's nothing for judo and wrestling out of those. Yeah.
Maybe judo a little bit because it's an Olympic sport.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I always think that I think most people think of judo as a more, like you said, it's an Olympic sport, so it has that level of prestige, and I think it's kind of gotten, people are so used to it and used to seeing it that it's kind of transitioned into the category of a more traditional martial art. I feel like my parents, were raising me in the 90s, so they saw the UFC. But my grandparents, I couldn't make them understand what jiu-jitsu was for the longest time. They thought I was literally talking about WWE style wrestling for years. And then they were one day my grandpa was oh, so kind of like judo. And I was oh my God.
But you know what judo is?
I could have just said this 2 years ago.
So grandpa, they're doing judo with
It's
punches.
yeah, Vladimir Putin does judo. I know what judo is. So yeah, I think that there is a little bit more respect for judo out there, but I do think it's always very interesting how some cultures really they take such a liking to, or they become such specialists at certain sports, and when I was in Roatan,
and that's one thing I want to go on today, where you start seeing certain cultures gravitate towards certain sports because of body type differences. We had a cool conversation about hip differences and stuff like that.
Oh
yeah.
really?
Oh no, this is we'll get into that, but I was oh man, that's I was we broke out a while ago on on a subject like that, and I was fuck yeah, we're gonna go in on it today. So, what were you saying, Dylan?
I was just saying that when I was on Roatan, I met a lot of people who asked me what I did, and eventually I was telling them about martial arts, and they were I don't think there's a single person on this island who knows jiu-jitsu. And my friend Alex is a purple belt at 10th Planet, and he's just you mean I can kick everyone on this island's ass?
I was yeah, don't go inverted or something, you might get stabbed.
But yeah, I was just so impressed that the only martial arts school there was basically just a guy who taught boxing. That was it. He did boxing privates out of his villa. There was not even a gym, it was just a heavy bag by the pool, and you just came and got privates from this Honduran guy,
that sounds like the life.
And I was yeah, man, yeah. So I just think it's interesting how, even though the UFC can be so international and have a champion from Cameroon and champions from all over the globe, and it's there's still places where, they probably still think a black belt in karate is roadhousing everybody, you know? Like,
oh shit, he's a black belt, he's the new mayor. Fuck. Like
legally he owns this island.
Damn it, he's the most dangerous person. Yeah.
So, I gotta hear about this.
Okay, so we went into like kind of like and it starts with me pointing out differences between like Dutch kickboxing and traditional Muay Thai. And like when I say traditional Muay Thai, I mean like stadium style Muay Thai, where you traditionally see a stance of like one leg directly underneath, one leg light in front for fast teeps and lead leg reactions. It's way less boxing oriented and way more hand fighting to clinch knee and elbows. So it's like a very, and I call it stadium Thai. And that's like the joke. But when I say that, people go, oh shit, yeah, that's how they fight in stadiums in Thailand. And then you have the Dutch Muay Thai, which is a bit more of a boxier base, still squared on in the chest, adapted more for boxing and a Kyokushin hybrid. But the big difference between like the posture change is from how people are built. Like Dutch and like Westerners here, we're kind of like fridges. We're just square as shit, you know? But then you have the Thais that are all kind of built like praying mantises. Like they're all kind of like skinny, and it works on like narrow hips. You have some thicker ones, like you're seeing a big push, and I think you can see too of like the more modern Thai box scene has like totally changed their weightlifting scene, and it's changing their posture a little bit. But the very narrow Thais can get away with having a leg underneath, and it doesn't do any damage to their hips. But you take someone like your size, or even my size, like a Western sized person, and we put all of our weight on one hip like that, like you're gonna have to have a hip surgery, like a hip replacement by the time you're 30.
Yeah.
And I've met people that are like in their 20s needing to get hip surgery done on their back hip because they're trying to stand like the dude overseas who is the exact opposite of you. So that's why I make people stand like a Dutch. Very boxy. Like we have similar hips to a Dutch. We got to use both our hips to move all this ass.
Yeah.
You know, where Thais need like half that hip to move half that ass to half. And that's just like one thing I've noticed. Like you are seeing like, you'll see guys like Bukau who are a lot thicker. Even they have a bit more squared off stance. Like he will rock back to like a 60-40, but he doesn't hang out there too much. So you'll kind of see like how people develop physically and where they develop like muscle strength that like changes a lot of how they might stand for a specific martial art. Or some martial arts just work better for other people. But we were talking about like the styles of that. You even see how, what were the hips that you talked about? You pulled up like the example of it.
Yeah, I think it was studies done from Stuart Brickle. He's a guy from up in Canada, professor up in Canada. I think it's mainly from squat, but yeah, you have Celtic hip, which is Celtic and Eastern European. For the Celtic one, it's gonna point like, as you remember, C, like center. As you know, the pelvis is like a bowl. So the acetabulum, the fossa of the hip, or the hip labrum, or the socket, it's gonna face more towards the side, which means a little bit more wider stance, and it's good for rotation. But for the Eastern European, the socket of the hip is gonna face more anteriorly or towards the front, which is a little bit more for hip flexion. Like that's what you can see. Like usually Asian people of Asian ancestry, they can squat really narrow and try to get my legs braced. Yeah. So obviously it goes into the debate nature versus nurture. Like genetics play a role, and in fact, you're also like your nurture. You may have like perfect hips, like in that case Eastern European hips, more like facing towards the floor, which is perfect for squat and not that good for rotation. But if your sports does not require that, you won't develop that. So it's also a debate of nature versus nurture. But yeah, for the most part, it's Celtic and Eastern European hips.
So if someone is trying to get more flexion or just be more mobile in general in their hips, and you have this information in mind, would you consider, or did that professor, did he get into maybe different training regimens for different types of hip postures? Or
also, yeah, like for the most part, first of all, you have to assess. Like obviously, there's a test. It's not, I don't know how good it is, but it's called crack test. Basically, have you go face down and move your hip and femur like up and down. Like there's this particle called greater trochanter or trochanter. So basically, where that's more prominent, it's gonna tell me if you're more. Because also, like I didn't have to mention this, hips can face a little bit more anterior of the femur per se, which is anteverted, which means allows you for more internal rotation, which is when your foot goes in. And some people are retroverted, which allows for more like external rotation when your foot goes out. So depending on that, it's gonna be your squat like stance.
That's probably why some
kicking
people's
stance.
legs snap right away and some don't, depending like when they can defend a heel hook or something like that. Probably just like if they have that natural bend one way or the other, like if their foot's turned in, I bet that person has to tap super quick. But the person that has like the out probably has an extra little bit of like give if someone's really trying to twist, like because that's why you'll see like Homeboy that got his leg shredded by Musumeci. Like it looked like Musumeci was like just pulling, but then
Did you watch that?
Yeah, I think
and that was bad, right? And he looked like he had like his leg was just kind of built for going like or like maybe I have my directions backwards.
Did you hear
like,
what the doc?
maybe it goes with it. It would
Dr.
do better.
Kekas,
Yeah.
he's a great he's a great guy to follow. Like he said, like I don't remember how long it's gonna be out, but he popped several like ligaments.
Yeah, he said it was.
He
bad,
said it was
bad.
akin to a motorcycle accident.
Yes, yeah, that is gnarly.
Which is the kind of injury I had on my leg. So like,
But I think we've all seen it where you see like Dan Hardy was a good example back in the day of just like, holy shit, that dude's arm doesn't break, and it's because Nicole has Gumby arms. Like you'll just see some people that can just be like, I don't feel anything. Then some people are like, to here they're like, oh shit, tap tap, and like some people did it's like it traces back to like, how white are you?
And for some, like what was the girl's name who came in here for a while? Maria. I guess she had just done yoga, so she was a little bit more flexible than most people, and I think that plays a big part in. In because jiu-jitsu, a lot of it is ligament-based attacks. So if your ligaments are more used to being, more elastic than other people's, then you're gonna have some. The older they are, the easier it is to get them to tap to shoulder locks, especially because that's a very hard area. Most people don't warm up, enough in my experience, for sure.
Oh yeah.
Also, not only warming up, but also addressing past injuries. Like, I'm not able to post something about this, but research has shown one of the biggest risk factors for injuries is past injuries. Because you have shoulder pain, and you never address that. Like, for the most part, I'm going to attack the side.
I like how you call it a spaz injury.
That is something I was going to talk to you about as well. Like, what is the point for you as someone who trains martial arts? You've, especially in jiu-jitsu, I feel like it's kind of hard for a lot of people in jiu-jitsu community, especially when they're first starting training jiu-jitsu and they're not used to what is a normal ache and pain and what's not. What is the point for you? And obviously, it can be very different for everyone, but is there any particular signs you should look out for when you have some kind of soreness or some kind of minor injury to the point where, okay, I need to have this scanned, I need to have this looked at because this is not going away, or whatever the case may be?
That's a great question. Also, like everything, it depends. But I would say if you have like major weakness, like numbness, tingling, and being like both sides, being involved, you can see some atrophy, like wasting of the muscles. If it's debilitating, for the most part, it's not so bad to train with pain, a little bit of pain. Good guide you utilize. It's called a traffic light system. Like from scale 1 to 10.
You posted this on your Instagram.
So basically something like that. Yeah, like I said, atrophy of the muscle, bilateral weakness, bilateral like numbness, tingling.
So you're saying like if you have both sides of your body, when you say bilateral.
Yeah, sorry, both sides. If you notice like, not necessarily, but if you notice like weakness and like numbness in both sides, for the most part, it can be something stemming from the spinal cord, or most likely not. And if it's debilitating, because for the most part, what it's sports like martial arts, where your objective is to break down your opponent, you're gonna have a little bit of pain. It's to be expected. But my biggest question for most patients, like people who deal with it, is it affecting your game? Is it something you cannot deal with? Because yes, pain is super subjective.
So if you're at a, one, you were saying like a 1, 2, 3 training jiu-jitsu or something like that, it's not going to be, necessarily, like you're saying, it's not debilitating.
Yeah, it's not debilitating. It's not affecting your game. If it's,
you just kind of hang out at 3. And like I even tell people and like especially like people that are new to competition, even like their first jiu-jitsu competition coming up, they're starting to get into a little bit harder roles. Like they might have to turn up sparring, and I'm just like, you're gonna operate on your best day probably at a 5, and that means you're kind of doing the right thing. And then we bring you back down to like a 2. And then you push it. After your fight, you might be a 6 or a 7.
That's what I'm saying.
But you'll be okay. If there's a 10 the next day, get it looked at. And it's like, that is like, it's I guess like, yeah, subjective right thing, but it's like you kind of got to learn how to deal with it to some degree, and there's always a way to still work through something to like strengthen something around it, stay active, like don't just focus on that one thing. Like you can do a lot of small little Lego ass pieces like around that injury to stay active.
And that's my biggest, like, that's my approach to most.
Unless you're Dylan and you blow your knee up, and like that's kind of tough to like. Still,
well, it was very obviously debilitating.
Yeah,
I couldn't walk. So,
yeah,
you know, I wouldn't have gone to training with it. I think that most guys probably just like either partial tear or they tweak their MCL. I think most commonly is the one that you can kind of ignore and still train on, you know. And then there's guys like Kieran Shanahan, who trains at Elevate, judo champion and all this stuff, wrestler.
He has like no knees.
And he won the Toro Blue Belt Invitational with no ACL in either leg. And it's just like, he can do that because he's just been pretending that he had them for so long.
Yeah.
You know, he got both of them fixed, so I think he's actually.
Oh, good.
You know,
for him.
He's been out for a while. He's been lightly training, taking it easy. So hopefully, you know, they're good this time. I know that when you have the kind of career he has, especially in like multi-sport, it can be so devastating.
My arm injury taught me how to be a southpaw. That's why I coach so many southpaws now, because the doc said, yeah, you're going to have like maybe 60% usage of this arm. And I was like, I can jab over here. And I just did that for a while. And then I went into a fight and I was like, fuck that, I'm very much orthodox still. And then, but no, like I used this injury as like a way to learn habits from this side. And now like when I coach people, it's like, why do you know so much southpaw stuff? And I was like, well, I had to be a southpaw like, for a hot minute. And then, yeah, so I tell people like through every injury, you can learn a lot of stuff. And sometimes for some people in this sport is like, you got to learn how to just chill out and relax. Like that, I had so many injuries that it was like when I was younger where it's like, you have to sit still or you won't get better. And I was like, what do you mean? And I'm not much of a video game player, and it would drive me insane, but it puts me in that headspace.
Now you are.
Well, I mean, I play Pokemon. Like, I mean, I'll play, like, when I have an injury, it's like, okay, I can play Pokemon.
Only for like 4 hours a day.
Whatever,
not even
yeah, you know, not even that much.
A modest amount.
A modest amount of Pokemon, okay. But no, it was like, it's tough. Like, I can't do like the 12-hour span where some people are like, oh, cool, I can fucking Call of Duty for 12 hours. But like, you learn how to like develop like good internal habits through injury, like where to put your head at in a good space. You learn how to like read things differently, learn how to like write like and meditate through writing like differently and stuff like that. And I even tell people you have to mentally like heal with that injury as well, because your body's like, shit, it's never going to be the same. And if you sit there in your head going like, it's never going to be the same, then it's never going to be the same. But if you sit there and you fix everything around it, you can come back better. Yeah. Like we've all seen, like
I think our friend Sam Fallhaber would say, "Listen to your body."
Yeah,
you know, and
yeah,
I think that that's a skill all on its own.
Yeah,
is the ability to kind of know when do I have pain that I can train with, and when do I actually need to kind of take a night off and ice and all this other stuff.
And I think the biggest thing with that's like pain's super complex. Like
yes.
It's not like there's different.
Everyone has different. Yeah, and also like everyone develops different like pain habits. Like people recognize pain differently. Like some people get hit in the face with a frying pan and be like, I'm fine.
And
like
cultural difference. Like there's something called biopsychosocial. It wasn't intended for pain, but many factors enhance, for the better or for worse, or increase your pain tolerance. Let's say like anxiety, depression, like lower your pain tolerance or threshold. I would say tolerance, yeah. So you're more susceptible to pain. Different cultures react different with pain. That's why, like, for your biology, it's just one component of the pain experience. Because at the end of the day, pain is an experience. You can have damage with no pain and pain with no damage. And pain does not...
Pain with no damage, damage with no pain.
Yeah. Let's say, for example...
Yeah, like I had, like, my brain stopped for a second. I was like, I think I'm picking up what you're putting down. Yeah.
Yeah, like, there's no one-on-one relationship with damage and pain. Like a paper cut. Here's, like, hell. And it's minimal damage. So basically take that approach, same thing for the rehab and your body. Like your spine is so different, your body adapts to things. Like injury to a certain degree can be like Sam says, like time of exploration of your body and discovery, like what feels good. Basically rehab and treatments, like what feels good, do more of it for now. What feels bad, for the acute center, for the next couple of days, depending on the degree of the injury, trying to avoid it. Because sometimes it's even therapeutic to poke into pain a little bit.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we tend to overprotect and underexpose an area. Let's say you have knee pain, like
you learn the limitations and also maybe get it a little bit further every time back to normality.
Yeah, so long answer for your question, I'm not so much focused on pain, I'm more focused on function. Are you allowed to still function with certain degree of pain, which doesn't disable or like limits you? Yes. Does it return to your baseline? Yes. Then for the most part, you have to be too concerned. Obviously, it depends on the person. Some people like it's a 1 out of 10, but I need guidance. Like that's basically doctors. Like doctors from the Latin word docere, which is to teach. Like I want to teach my patient how to guide through their rehab journey and manage their injuries. Like you don't need me. If you want me, I'm gonna be there in your corner.
Right.
Like basically, you look, I'm Yoda. Like so, you need help in your knee pain. I can provide you the knowledge or the tools to help you recover with it, but I'm not fixing you. Like you're fixing yourself.
Yeah, and then through that empowerment, eventually you hope that they continue to like self-rehab on their own.
Yeah.
Right. Do these techniques. You know, I was a big part of what I think really bounced me back from my knee surgery was my physical therapist was like, we're doing all these exercises together, and as many as you can do on your own, you should try to do. And so, I bought the stretch out strap. I bought all of, the things that she had because I wanted to do it as close to as possible as she did it, right? Or that she showed me how to do it. And, I think that's like the biggest thing about knees specifically is getting that bend back or that extension back. And that just can't be done without multiple times of work a day, let alone, coming in twice a week to see your PT. I think that's like a big part of, especially for martial arts, empowerment. That's like, the same tools that we use as martial arts instructors with our students as well.
We teach discipline and like you have to show up and you have to do this, but you teach recovery, like you teach the discipline of the recovery where it's like you have to do this, you have to make this a routine, you have to make this a habit, where it's like the discipline of recovery creates better habits down the road for that person.
And it can't be for us. It has
to be for
the subject,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest fad trend to most discussed, talked about thing right now in not only the martial arts medicine world, but the fitness world in general is the cold plunge.
Yeah.
So do you have opinions on the cold plunge?
They used to be great for hangovers. Like that's what I like. I didn't know people were doing those for like recovery until I've known about it for like a while now, but I was like, oh, that's how we just got over like hangovers, like just a cold thing of water, we shove our head in it, and then we pour it, and then we're off. Like, felt great on my head. Yeah, I figured it makes sense for the rest of the body.
People have been using cold water therapeutically for everything from cold packs and ice packs and all this other stuff, but
to a certain degree, yes, it's a fad. It also depends why you're doing it. You're doing it more for strength, hypertrophy, like recovery. So it depends what's your end game and what's your goal behind what's your why behind the what. I haven't read that much, but some research I've seen, it says it's for the most part pretty good for strength and for like DOMS, like the late onset of muscle soreness.
I definitely noticed a big difference in that area, the muscle soreness area.
Yeah. For hypertrophy, not that much. Like if I've shown decreased gains for hypertrophy. So again, it depends why you're doing it. Honestly, for the most part, somebody asked me, if it feels good, do it. If you don't like it, don't do it. You don't need to do it. Mm-hmm. It might help, but you don't need, like...
I think it's looking at there's the mental and the physical benefit of it. Where I tell people, like, even if you feel like you're not sore and you're not beat up, but you still want to make that part of your routine. Like, look, some people can wake up and go do 5 miles. I can't do that. You know what I can do way easier than that? Wake up and sit in a cold bath for 5 minutes to think about what I'm going to do for the rest of the day. And like I tell people, like, even if it's not much of like I'm getting over the soreness thing, that mental place you have to put yourself for 5 minutes is going to help you kind of get through whatever else you're physically dealing with. It does help like that morning inflammation. It helps like that daily routine, but then also lets it go like the rest of the day is still going to fucking suck because you're in this ice bath because you hurt. Cool. Let's not overdo it. Let's still push through it, but let's not overdo it, I think. It's one of those things where it just teaches your head and your body to kind of work together. Mm-hmm. And in combat sports, people tend to go like one or the other kind of like takes over in a fight.
I think that a big part of the appeal also is the price tag as far as time goes, right? Yeah. 5 minutes.
Yes.
For just
I
5
can invest
minutes,
5 minutes into
for
doing
just
this,
5 minutes of my time, I could potentially get rid of my muscle soreness.
Yes.
Or at least minimize it to a certain extent. And that compared to an hour of like the massage gun and a hot bath, and then maybe even a heating pad or whatever the case may be.
I mean, I used to go into a sauna for an hour just because it was miserable. I didn't know about heat shock proteins until recently.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like people would be like, "Dude, were you in the sauna for 45 minutes? Like, is that for heat shock proteins?" And I'm like, "No, I hate myself. Like, that's why. Like, I had a gallon of water. I needed to pull the toxins out. Like, I'm trying to be a better person by sitting in there. What do you mean heat shock proteins? I'm hungry.
I'm on psychedelics.
Yeah,
I'm
I
trying
was
to
like,
see God.
yeah. Bro, you're looking like a squid right now. Could you not talk to me, man? But
no, when I was in Austin, that was the move. We would go train jiu-jitsu, and then we'd go across the street to the wellness spot. We'd pay our fucking $15 or whatever, and we'd go into the sauna for 10 minutes, and then you cold plunge for 5 minutes. Then you go back into the sauna.
Oh, that sounds
for 10
great.
minutes.
Fuck.
And then go.
I like
and
that.
Well, by the time I left there, no soreness. I was ready
yeah.
to do another class.
Yeah.
So I could do like multiple classes a day or whatever.
When you do that bounce back and forth is when it's like a game changer.
Yeah, it was a very different.
Yeah.
It was a very different experience than just doing one or the other. Because I've done.
How many people
plunges.
do that when they're like cutting weight because
Yeah.
it cools the body back down, and it also pulls a lot of like the soreness and injuries out of the past couple weeks. It really refreshes you before a fight. And if you're cutting weight, like you cool it back down, you hop back in, you're sweating twice as hard.
I think most people have been in a sauna before, and cold plunge is kind of more of a new thing. But when I first started training like 6 years ago, people were telling people about that, or I had seen it because I knew to do it. Because I remember the night before, like my third jiu-jitsu tournament, I was still sore from training the day before, and so I like bought like 18 bags of ice and filled up my fucking bathtub with water and gave myself a cold bath. So I knew what it was even back then. So I've had them separately, and I definitely see the benefits of them separately. But that was the first time where they were directly across from each other with like 30 seconds of walk time between one and the other. So it was like you're still steaming, like the steam's still coming off of you, and your skin is still red if you're of the Caucasian persuasion like us, and you get in that fucking cold plunge, and it's like it's a different game altogether, for sure, and a different test of your will.
And I think the other part with all those fads, I have nothing against cold plunge if you're doing all the things for recovery. Like, one of the most underutilized tools, it's freaking sleep and diet. Like, if you're not sleeping good and you're like just putting a bind on the cold plunge, like, you might be better off suited just taking care of your sleeping patterns, putting them in order. And if you, on top of that, you want to do a cold plunge, by all means, it wouldn't hurt.
Yeah.
But if you're just putting just a band with all those fads, like, you're sleeping like shit, eating like shit, but you're foam rolling religiously, getting on the cold plunge religiously, you might, like, I don't see you wasting your time, but for the most part, you are. Just tackle the low-hanging fruits before. I think we kind of get lost with the fads, like. So yeah, just tackle those things. Might be easier. You might get more bang for your buck. It might be a little bit easier.
I tell kids, if you're gonna do a 2-a-day because you don't have to work today, take a nap in between classes. Like, even at like these young kids, I'm just like, dude, sleep. Like, get some sleep in between the workouts, man. Like, that goes a long way.
I usually
like,
have to
reset
sleep
recovery.
on my Tuesdays and Thursdays, like, because I come here and I teach, and then I'll also roll sometimes, or I'll be in the class myself because it'll just be me and one other person. Then I'll go do strength and conditioning with Greg, and then I'll eat, and then I'll be like done with work, but there's still like 2 hours till I have to be back here to teach. And I'm just I'm just gonna sleep. It's like fast traveling to the time. But
it's like I tell people, like, naps are a great way to cut down on like anxiety. Because if you sit there and you think too much about what you're about to do, like, you've got nothing to do. Like, you could read a book, you could watch a tutorial, but like, man, if you just take a fucking nap, it really helps you. Like you said, that time travel. Like, you know what I love about car rides? Time traveling through states, man. Like, different state, cool, sick. You guys still driving? Not mad, hot.
I don't think there's been a fitness fad that I've seen in the last like 5 or 6 years that I think has been unhealthy. I think it's just a matter of what works for who.
The cold and the heat, and like the ways people talk about it, like, it's been around forever.
Yeah.
I think it's just now gotten around. Like, there's one thing I've seen about martial arts becoming more mainstream is all this stuff that these guys have been doing for years to recover. Because you've always had like one fighter swear by just heat, one fighter swear by just cold, and people are like, man, fuck it, do both. But that was also like That's going on like 20 years
It's like
now.
as if they were mixing the martial arts.
Why? Like they're mixing recovery styles as well. But like you'll hear people say like, "Oh yeah, I feel great when I take a swim in this cold ocean here behind my house, eh?" And I'm like, "Yeah, Canadians, like I bet." And like that's their habit.
Cultures that have access to such things.
You even hear like some guys that might be in like a desert climate will still make like hot huts to cook themselves in because it's a different extra kind of heat. Like there's just like working outside and then you cook yourself in 120-degree sauna. Like it's a different type of thing. So culturally, like it's been a thing forever in martial arts, man. Even like kayaking and surfing, like, dude, the hangover cold water thing, I got that from surfers. Like that's what that was for. Like, but it's like I've seen like even like people were like, "Oh, foam rolling changed my life," and I'm like, "You're just now hearing about it." Like I remember seeing people using like the hollowed out pieces of wood or like a heavier like rubber band around it and stuff like that as like a foam roller. Like
when I
25 years ago,
when I was in football and I first got turf toe for the first time and it was really acting up, the doctor that I went to was like, "Here's what you do: you get a bottle of like soda or water, empty bottle, and fill it up with hot water, and then you just roll it with your foot." And I was like, "Okay, that doesn't sound like it's gonna work at all." And then I did that, and
you were like, "Oh my god!"
14-year-old me was like, "Oh!" So when I saw somebody foam rolling for the first time, I was like, "Makes sense." Like this made sense to me, you know, like
so like inversion therapy and stuff like that. Like that's one thing.
Oh, that was a big deal. My mom had
yeah.
one of those. I'd come home and she'd be hanging upside down like fucking a vampire bat, like, and I'd be like, "Oh," and she'd be like, "I locked it in place."
Bruce Lee made it famous, and he learned it from a wrestler. Like. Yeah, no, I mean it's like that, like because he had like that really nasty like weightlifting like back injury that they made famous, but like some dude kicking him in the back or some shit, like that was a huge lie. It was a lifting injury they made cooler, but like he would talk about like inversion therapy and but that's been a big thing from like wrestling forever, or like even like headstands. Like I remember as a kid, like all right, go do headstands, and it's like okay. And you have to go up against the wall, and it's helping you just decompress.
Neck bridging.
Neck bridging. Like it's a type of decompression that's been around like from grappling for years.
And I think it's like everything, like, the problem with those is like we paint broad strokes and like we assume like everybody's going to benefit from the cold plunge.
Yeah, so, like everyone's going to be a little bit
like,
different.
If you like it, like, for like for the thing, if you like it and feels good, you can do it, unless it's harmful, clearly harmful. But
anybody can take a good thing and turn it into a bad thing.
Yeah, too much of a good thing,
Yeah. Coming from a guy who's fallen asleep in a sauna. Oh man.
Yikes.
Yeah, like I was just I think it was like I think I was in there for about like 2 hours or something like that. I intended to be in there for 30 minutes, but I just fell asleep. And just like a dude woke me up and was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Ah!" And I just couldn't move. And like they had to like drag me out. Like they pulled me into a shower. Like I was fine. Like my heartbeat was like over 200. I was like, "Oh God, what's happening?" Like I was just being cooked. But like they said, it was a couple. Like I was close to it getting real bad. Yeah, it was like gnarly. Yeah. It took me like 4 days to recover from that, man. Like,
what was the cause of death?
I was fucking relaxed for those 4 days. I didn't move out of my bed.
Cause of death, doctor? He overdosed on heat shock proteins. Downright lethal dose of HSPs.
Huberman! Like that's my dying.
Doctor,
I just yell. But like you can take anything and turn it into a bad thing. I feel. I mean, it's like, hey, why'd you get sick? Sat in the cold plunge for too long. Like, good job, dumbass. Like there is also like staying in too long until it becomes a detriment.
Yes, you have to.
Even like with stretching, actually, which is something that like I've always been kind of like a gumpy person. But like apparently like too much stretching can be bad for you. Where it's always like there's been like the back and forth of like. You can never do enough stretching, and now there's a point where I guess like some people that might be like tighter hip, like more spring-loaded athletes, sometimes that little bit of stretching can take away from that athleticism like over time.
And it's
is that a true statement?
Yeah.
Is that more bro science?
No. Based on research I've read, like the thing is like everything's more nuanced. Like don't like the thing. Like it depends. First of all, it depends how we define stretching. It's a static. It's a dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Then how long are you holding positions for? Then are you doing before the event, after, during? And it also depends on the sport. Like
specific stretching.
Yeah.
Pre, post, stuff like that.
For the most part, yes. Research I've shown for pre-event or activity stretching might diminish your performance and function a little bit. Perhaps a little bit afterwards, it might be good, but also Yeah, it depends, super nuanced, and depends what type of stretching. For the most part, I don't recommend that much stretching, but if you're gonna do it, I highly recommend dynamic stretching, which is more like, not necessarily ballistic, but don't just hang in that position. Actually contract those muscles. Like, I don't know if you've seen it's called PNF, proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. They do it a lot for basketball players. They're laying on your back, kind of stretch the hamstrings, like pull down, then pull back up.
Yeah.
Basically, it's out of a principle called autogenic inhibition, or reciprocal inhibition, I should say. If I contract those muscles, it's going to make this one directly inhibit this one, which is going to allow me to go a little bit further, and consequently, so I find more value in those, and mainly martial arts, where it's not just passive movement. You actually have to have control over that movement, which I think most people confuse mobility with flexibility. I don't want you to be flexible. I want you to be mobile. Like, have control over this range of motion.
So would you say the same principle then applies to cars? You know what I'm talking about? C-A-R-S?
Cars, yeah.
Doc was like, Chevy? What the fuck?
Pixar's finest film?
You just stumped him so hard. He was like, the fuck does Lightning McQueen have to do with that? I saw him on his face, and I was like, caught me for a second. But
for those of you who don't know what Cars is, it's a type of I guess you would call it what would you call it? It's not really, it's a stretch and a rotation. It's kind of mobilization technique. Yeah, I mean, I think that was something that when I was introduced to it by Samantha Fallhaber once again, I was like, this seems to be better for getting me ready to do jiu-jitsu than just, like you say, static stretching would.
And yeah, I like cars a lot. It's just one way of stretching, but I like them because they're more dynamic and incorporate a little bit more rotation, because for Muslim Jiu-Jitsu, you're not only flexion extension, you're also external rotating and internal rotating. So that's based on Andrea Spina, who was the guy that founded FRC or cars, developed all that. Yeah, he was big into the rotation. First of all, the appendicular skeleton, meaning the extremities. Just first working that rotation before working that linear path. So yeah, I love cars, and if patient likes it, yeah. And it's just the principle of regional independence. Like, I can move my thoracic spine if I can move my elbow in it for itself. And then it's when you start implementing the integration of the thoracic or rib cage rotation with the arm rotation. So yeah, I like cars for that matter. For not only for BJJ, but for multi, there's strikes, hip cars, ankle cars. You can do cars for any joint of your body.
Do you think that in the long term, as far as functional and like you say, mobility versus flexibility, you would say that weight training is more beneficial than, just simply stretching body weight, stuff like that? Because I know you're kind of big on weight training as well.
Yeah, my bias is gonna say yes, but again, it also depends what you're doing. Because obviously, research have even shown, you can get a little bit of hypertrophy with stretching. But the point is the dose, how much stretching you need to do when you can do the same thing with strength training. So it depends on the purpose. Again, depends, super nuanced, so it depends. The what behind the what, what's your end goal? But for strength, yeah, you want to be stronger, put a bar, do abs to ground squats. Obviously, if you can, if your body allows you.
Add a resistance band to what you're already doing.
Yeah, control and intent behind that motion. Because obviously, I'm as strong as my weakest link. So if all I have is this motion, if I go over there for jiu-jitsu, you might get injured a little bit. So I don't know, just grab a dumbbell or Y press, things like that, to further increase your range of motion and strength within that range of motion. Because if you're strong over here, if all you have is access to this range of motion, that's all you're going to be strong. But if I have access to all this, now I can incorporate length or spectrum of the muscle contraction.
I see, and ligament contraction as well, right?
Yeah, there's two types of law. One is called Wolff's law. It's your bone. It's gonna adapt to the stress it's placed on. That's why basically you form calluses they don't start kicking on bats, nothing like that. They start something soft. Eventually they start building the weight up there with proper recovery and proper progressions. So the same thing with the ligaments and soft tissue structures like ligament bones, ligaments, tendons, things like that. It's called Smith's laws. So basically your body's gonna adapt to the place with the stress you place upon it, given the proper recovery, your amount of recovery and progressions. So yeah.
I see. Okay. That's interesting. I've not heard somebody say any derogatory things about stretching in my entire life until right now. So I'm getting some information right now.
Modern head stretching, like it's not. I have nothing against it. I just
didn't think that there could be too much of that. You know,
Yeah.
like that's interesting to hear. You know, not necessarily derogatory against stretching, but you know, the idea that there can be such a thing as too much of that,
Stretching,
even that
yeah.
as well, right? So
that's a
Because
new
too much stretching, like you were saying, it weakens like tendon strength. It takes away from joint strength in some areas, doesn't it?
Not necessarily.
So next time I skip
Depending on like, what
warm-ups,
you're wanting to work
next
on,
time I skip warm-ups, I can be like, I'm maintaining my athleticism.
No, there's a point. I would.
or I guess it
Change
depends
so
on
much
like
sometimes.
pre and
Depends
post
on
on
what type
and
of
what
stretching
you're doing.
and what sports are you
Yeah.
doing. So it depends on many things because for example, sprinters, you need tight, quote unquote, tight hamstrings for that explosiveness. Because if I stretch that out, like
Yeah.
Makes
You're
me
going to
mechanical.
lose that little bit of
from a
tension that
mechanical
makes you
perspective- yeah,
fast.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like that's called stretch SNC, stretch shortening cycle or contraction. Same thing like for fighters, you have an anterior oblique swing, like you want that explosiveness. Same thing for runners, bringing on the hamstrings. If I take that out, like I'm taking what makes you perform to
Yeah.
a certain level. So I don't hate stretch by any means. I'm not that big fan of it, but again, if the patient likes it, and maybe for martial arts, it has more value. My problem with stretching is when people stretch for pain. Like, same thing with strength training. You don't need to strength train for pain. I love it because it makes you stronger, helps your immune system, a lot of stuff, but you don't have to do certain things. Do they help? Yes. But again, maybe I'm being too much of a stickler with semantics, the need versus would or help.
No, I think it's good to have that kind of a more objective view on things because, you know, obviously all of my understanding and Trevor's understanding would be, you know, layman shit that we see on Instagram or whatever, or pick up from your posts or something like that. So it's good to have somebody who's like, well, yeah, I mean, obviously it depends on person to person. It's good to just have, you know, someone start everything off with that because that's the same. I mean, you know, life would be a lot better if more people saw, you know, their own, what they're seeking for themselves through that lens, right? They're all looking for a good answer, which I think is like one of those reasons like why, you know, even Liver King, you know, his message wasn't necessarily the most unhealthy message. He was just encouraging people to eat organ meat, which we know is not bad for you. And because of him, a lot of people probably tried it and was like, oh, it's terrible, or it's not so bad, or I noticed a big difference in my performance. So, you know, some people found out even through this weird way that this is for them. So, you know.
Some people have gotten into fighting because of the Paul brothers. Like that's
God,
the time
yeah,
that we're in.
I'm glad
you know?
that we're
like,
past the era where people say because of Connor, and now we are accepting.
No,
that.
and now
there's
and-
a worse reason to get into
Yeah,
it.
There was like the kid Andrew. Like he's in school right now again, but like he wanted to check out boxing because of fucking Jake and Logan Paul, and I was like, I just walked over to Pillow, I fucking screamed into it, and he was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm just wrapping my head around that that's the time we're alive in." But yeah, whatever, YOLO kids, do what your idols do, man, except heroin. Like,
Not, allegedly, we're not saying that the Hall brothers are on heroin. We don't want to get the cease and desist. We don't want to get struck by Logan.
But it's the same thing with the ATG, the knees over toes guys. Like a lot of people ask me, like, "Oh, what do you think of him?" Like, his exercises are good because I think in healthcare, like we have China wave or have taken this approach for the body. Like the body is fragile, you need to protect it. But again, like I said, your body adapts to things you expose it to. It. Like there's a principle called the SAID principle, SAID. Specific adaptations to impose demands. Your body is going to adapt to whatever demand you're going to place on it.
Yeah.
So going back also to the hip, like the nature versus nurture. You might have a pristine hip like rotation, but if your sports does not require it, you might not develop it. You might not use it. Which so everything's super nuanced. So yeah.
But I mean, you see that. Like it's wild to see some people that grow up in certain sports, some people that grow up in certain martial arts, and even me, like. I've met some people where I'm like, list off the sports you've tried. And like, if they've tried a lot of like the mainstream sports, they didn't fit well into that, like they had some good moments from that, they're probably going to be a good martial artist because they don't have the thing that makes them just like a one line kind of athlete. They have the ability to move and be a bit springier and stuff like that. And like, but then I also meet some people that are just built for like baseball, built for football, and they don't translate all the time to martial arts, or it's like a longer learning curve and stuff like that. Yeah.
Which is just for strength conditioning, you perform a needs analysis. Certain sports require different mobility, strength.
It's like the swimmer, like people talk about Phelps, and he being like they're like, oh, that's like the perfect human for swimming. But and it's like they talk about like if he did anything else, he'd be hella mediocre. Probably. Usain Bolt. Yeah.
They said that he was like built biologically like as the perfect runner. Like just the way his like
he could still like maintain muscle and like to his bones and stuff like that. Yeah.
The thing with that for fighting, it's not that clear cut. Like you have John Jones on one spectrum, and you have Volkanovski.
Well, so but you'll see, and I'll even tell people, MMA. If someone's a specialist, they can have like their body type work well. There's not really one body type that works best for MMA. It's what that person does with their body type that makes them special. As in like DC, the world's shortest light heavyweight and heavyweight champion, has his teammate Darren Wynn, a 5'8" middleweight, but like the dude is not DC.
But
like, I mean, and then you also have
I think that there's not that's the beautiful thing about martial arts, and it's more specifically MMA, is that there's no ideal body type, there's no ideal archetype physically. But there is mentally.
Yes.
That's like where that's where the key distinction is.
Difference
right?
is, yeah.
Like we talk about Trevor Loken all the time, how he's just like he's literally been put on this earth
just
for only one reason.
Yeah, to fight.
I mean, he knows it and we know it, and he showed it against Marcus Bramaj.
Yeah.
And I think that you just have to have a certain baseline, if not mental fortitude, a mental difference than the average person walking around, especially when you start getting up to doing it at that level, where you're not just doing it in front of your mom and your cousins and a couple of people in the bingo hall, and you're fighting like in a huge arena, and the pressure is high, and you're fighting somebody who used to be in the UFC. All of that stuff can't affect the other mental aspects.
So I'll tell people
it's crazy.
Like the craziest mindset I've ever seen or worked around has been pure boxing. To be a high level pure boxer is the craziest, most David Goggins type shit, because it is a very set work ethic. Like you have to be constantly like stuck to your fundamentals, always engaging, dealing with the pressure that is someone always hitting your head.
The quest for
but however, that mindset breaks in MMA because of the interruptions. Like in MMA, you have more ways of establishing like what you want to do, but sometimes if you can't accept a setback in a fight, then you just crumble and break. And in MMA, like you have to be okay with that fight not going your way. Like everyone that's winning a fight has had a bad moment in an MMA fight at some point.
Right.
And I've seen a lot of good guys like fall behind in that mental set. And I was talking to like a friend of mine over the weekend who's a world champion kickboxer, brown belt in jiu-jitsu, tons of kickboxing matches, now a pro boxer. But like he even says, he's like, man, the hardest thing is like trying to be like a boxer, because even with all his combat, like when it's just boxing, he's like, holy shit, like what a place to be in your head at. Of like when someone is just coming at your head the whole fucking time, like you don't have a moment to break inside there, and it's always like that one moment of hesitation can cause that slip up.
Especially
and then you're behind.
Like in that sport boxing where where people are so technical, even at the lower level, it's like it's a different game than MMA altogether, because of, like you said, the interruptions, but also just the idea that everybody is like has to stay undefeated.
Yeah.
If they want to be like on Showtime, they want to be on one of these big shows, they have to be undefeated, or it's just not going to happen.
I always love talking about the Hagler-Hearns fight, because you have two of the most different body types in boxing, and it made for one of the best boxing matches because they were the best at being themselves with their specific frames.
Anthony Joshua and Andy Ruiz in their fight.
There
I
you
thought that
go.
was very interesting as well.
Absolutely,
Jones DC is always a cool matchup. In an interview from like 2005 where they were like, DC, how do you feel about being called the Black Fedor? He was like, I don't find anything like Fedor. We just don't have abs.
Fedor's a great example. Like, what other sport could he be good at? Combat Sambo,
Judo.
but still, like... But he was a combat sambo world champion. But even like for MMA, like, man, that's the only kind of sport he could be a world champion in.
And he could have maybe been a world champion, but he couldn't have been as a GOAT consideration in any other era of MMA.
Yeah.
Whether it was the very beginning or whether it was now.
Now there's a ton of Fedors.
Yeah, but
like, at
the
least, like,
cage,
physically, yeah.
he was way better in the ring.
That's true.
He was way better in the ring.
Crow Cop talks about like the first time he got put up against a cage wall was his first MMA fight his first fight in the UFC, and he was just like, "Oh shit, this is not fun."
Yeah.
That's why I love the cage, man. It's just its own fucking like thing for martial art.
Yeah,
it's made mixed martial arts unique. Is the cage wall?
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Like when I hear Joe Rogan talk about making fun of a basketball court, I'm like,
Put down the fucking pipe,
I'm like,
Joe.
that is the dumbest fucking idea. Like, even like a pit makes more sense because like they're still stuck in front of each other. But yeah, like it's. God damn it, Joe! Stop ruining good things. I want Joe Rogan to start his own sports league and watch it just bomb after the first one. He'd be like, "All right, yep, I'll stop talking about
I think
it."
I think the bar has been set so low by this fucking slap fighting league that literally anything that gets put out will be like, oh, well, at least it's not slap
fighting league. Yeah, you know what? Good for Dana White for promoting the worst possible product to make the UFC look that much better.
Well, I think that the problem with it...
He's making literally everything
slap fighting is including Slap Fighting Championship, which is the actual biggest promotion for slap fighting. In Europe, it's really popular, but part of what makes it very popular is that it's so grassroots and not corporate, and, you know, like, it's rowdy and underground and edgy sort of.
Yeah.
And they also like have a completely different set of rules than the slap fighting in the UFC, because the UFC has a rule set where clubbing and stepping are not allowed, but it's not enforced. So you can like step in on a slap and you can club, which means you can slap with this part of your hand. And that's why if you watch Slap Fight Championship, there's hardly ever knockouts.
Yeah.
But then you see Power Slap, that's what it's called.
And
you
they're
see
using
Power
the
Slap.
fucking, I haven't watched a single thing on
And
it yet.
they get knockout after knockout every single episode, and it's just the CTE channel for 30 minutes, and then it's over, and you're just like, what's going to happen to these people after this?
I didn't know they were using
They're making 2 and 2.
palm.
Yeah.
God.
Stepping in and clubbing is like, you know, because I watched this YouTube video about like breaking down the differences between. It was a guy who watched Power Slap, who's like I guess he's like some kind of slap commentator for
What
the Europeans.
nation has the biggest hands? You're on the spot.
Slovenians.
Wait, really?
The guys who lift the Atlas stones, I would imagine.
Oh, shit.
Just because like every time I see a
block.
video of like Slovenian guys or even Scottish guys lifting the Atlas stones, you
They
see
have
like
giant hands.
all the Irish, Celtic, English motherfuckers have like little hands, and those like Eastern Bloc European Slovenians and the fucking
I was impressed when you said specifically the village of Slovenia.
the guys from what's
Can't
that
spell slap without
place?
Slovenia.
Belarus.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine they have pretty big hands too. Anybody who does like the World's Strongest Man's competition and has like constant representation, I would think is up there.
Has anyone seen X-Arm? Did you ever see that?
Tony Robbins has the biggest hands I think I've ever seen.
X-Arm used to be, they start off like arm wrestling, and you're allowed to, you can
That was
punch.
on Access TV.
Yeah, it was on Access TV.
Yeah.
You can strike each other with whatever, like people throw head kicks trying to like pin
Now
the other
that's
person's the
cooler
arm.
than
Like
Power Slap.
dudes would like, you could also go for like arm bars apparently. And there was like one arm bar finish where like the dude grabbed on and like did an arm bar over on the X-Arm thing. And I was like, damn, like I want to see that over slap fighting.
Yeah, Kimuras. I could see Americanas from there. You know, like that would be exponentially cooler than slap fighting.
Yeah.
I think the problem with slap fighting is like you're literally getting concussions. Like
Yeah.
I get it. Like
The
that's
defining
one
rule of
sports, like,
MMA is
the
protect
fact-
yourself at all times.
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
you're just willingly standing there to get hit. Like
The fact that they are paying Mark Smith and the UFC refs to ref it is insane. Like, I understand they want some kind of brand recognizability, and also when you do something like this in the U.S., a commission has to like sign off on it. I guess, like even though it's just slapping, I guess they were like, if it's going to be televised, we have to be involved. So I understand using the commission for that, but it is so clear that they have no idea what they're looking at, and they're just like, that guy's definitely fucking concussed. Like, you know, you just see Mark Smith like oh shit, just watching the guy fall over.
What are the rules exactly? Because I see like they have rounds. They go by a round. Is it like the first one to die?
Yeah, I mean, in slap fighting it technically is, in a power slap it would be. But yeah, so it's supposed to be like a certain number of rounds and a certain number of slaps, and then it goes to like I guess a judge's decision for power slap. And then if there's no finish. But they get finishes a lot because they don't enforce the two main rules, which is that you can't step in and you can't club. But if they had slap referees there, they probably would be like, yeah, you can't do that. But Mark Smith has never seen Slap Fighting Championship and doesn't watch YouTube.
There's some slap expert somewhere going, this is fucking wrong.
Yeah. There's probably hundreds. I mean, think about trying to make a show for a very niche audience and then make that thing blow up like you did with the UFC. And then you make it in a way where the niche audience you made it for, who's the only people who are going to promote it for you for free, are like, this fucking sucks.
I feel like slap fighting should be the overtime round for a rough and rowdy brawl. Like, then it would make sense.
It's the new XFL.
Oh my god.
It's the new XFL. It's, Vince McMahon made a football product for people who didn't like how, pussified
for
the
people
NFL
that dropped
was.
out of high school.
So yeah, exactly. And then it came out, and they were like, "This is really corporate and sucks." And there's commercials every 10 seconds, and it's just like, oh, well, wrestling fans aren't going to like it because it's football. It's not wrestling. UFC fans aren't going to like power slap because
get extra
it's not
points
UFC.
for murder. Like if you drop kick an opposing player, point. They should do that.
Yeah, I do like that. Literally everything Dana's ever done without the Fertitta brothers has failed miserably.
Yeah.
How's Zuffa Boxing going again? Zuffa Boxing, you remember that?
That's a thing.
That was a thing for like a couple weeks.
I had no idea.
You don't remember him wearing the Zuffa Boxing T-shirt?
No.
Yeah. Oh man.
Oh fuck! Was he? He's trying to promote like that young Irish kid that's a boxer.
King Callum Walsh.
Yeah, Callum Walsh.
Yeah,
I thought like that was his only like foray.
Legit too.
Oh no! What was Zuffa Boxing?
It ended up being nothing.
Oh really?
I mean,
was it for Callum Walsh?
I think it was when Conor fought Floyd. He announced that Zuffa Boxing was going to be a thing, and that there were going to be more UFC boxing events like crossover. Oh yeah, here it is. He's wearing the Zuffa Boxing T-shirt at the Mayweather-McGregor press conference.
Okay. He looked like a tomato right there.
Oh, this was back when he was at his most unhealthy. Like he's definitely a lot better off now than he was then. But yeah, these Zuffa Boxing T-shirts.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how's your blood pressure? And at 10, there's that picture of Dana White instead of the number.
He just said it was too hard. It was too political to try to get into boxing apparently, and walked away from it. But I mean, what really happened is he probably discovered that he couldn't pay boxers pennies on the dollar, and was like, "Wait, what? Like, you guys aren't desperate?" That's when you were talking about the interruptions of being an MMA fighter. I was like, "Yeah," and they don't stop. Sometimes you got to fucking go back and work your 8-hour shift at Olive Garden after your MMA fight. You're not gonna have to do that after like your third big boxing fight.
A lot you'll see if like guys are managed right or around like the right promoter and stuff like that. Like guys easily make like 5, 6, 7 grand like their first boxing match. Yeah. There's also like a big thing where a lot of times, if you are in the right area, like if you're running the promotion right, the promotion a lot of times won't even pay these pro boxers, but they have a management company that gives them guaranteed purses because like they're in charge of all their like they'll find investors for boxers that are like sponsors. Yeah. So these boxers still get like 10 grand that the promoter's not even having to pay. There's like these guys just get paid by their sponsors and like backers, and like that's it. Like I knew some promoters.
As a UFC fighter.
What's that?
Can't have any of that as a UFC fighter.
Nope.
I'm looking forward to what's gonna happen with Francis.
He's definitely.
He goes to pro boxing. He beat the game. Fucked. He's so fucked.
He only needs to fight once.
That's it. Yeah, he can get retirement money in one
fight. He's
fight.
gonna fight Fury, and then he's gonna go away forever. I mean, maybe he'll fight in PFL. I think that any other major promotion in the world would be like, you sign with us, you can go box whoever the fuck you want, Francis. We'll be waiting right here when you get back. In fact, we'll postpone our heavyweight tournament a whole year waiting for you to get back. Like every other promotion in the world wants him, and it is only good PR to get him. Yeah. Because after he laid out what his actual demands were, you're like, oh, okay, this guy.
I just want to be treated like a human. Can't do it.
Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, well, anybody who's seen signing him, especially signing him with the caveat that he can go box, especially like Bellator. I mean, Bellator needs something like him so bad. One has Kayla Harrison.
But then it
one
sucks
has,
for
like,
Bellator because, well, I mean, like, they can keep him around, but they'll also know, like, he's not the most, like, legitimate. Like, he's good, I think, for just a couple fights in Bellator. If they realize, like, we just can't get anyone near good enough to fight him.
He surrendered his belt to the UFC. He didn't lose it.
Yeah.
Anywhere he goes, people can say, we have the best heavyweight in the world.
True.
They can just say that.
Yeah.
And they won't technically be wrong until they find a way to lure him back for a John fight. But he's never coming back. Like, Nate's never coming back because they're going to get a contract.
Russia needs to have Fedor versus Ngannou happen.
Fedor's... Okay, so they actually specifically asked him.
That'd be cool.
They specifically asked Fedor about this because Fedor's supposed to fight for the last time this Saturday.
Oh, that's right, Bader.
So, yeah, it's supposed to be his retirement fight. And a Russian reporter was like, what if Francis Ngannou is cage side? And he's like, nothing will change.
Wow.
And so he's like, I'm not getting knocked out by this motherfucker. I'm 69 years old. I'm a billion years old in fight years, and I'm trying to get out of here. That's about, Ryan Bader is like the one guy they can put me in there with where I'm like not gonna be killed,
Fair, true.
Ryan Bader's had a really nice little Bellator run, but I'm not really worried about him like unhinging Fedor's eye socket or breaking his orbital or anything like that.
He already knocked him out once.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it'll probably happen again.
Yeah, there's fights for the UFC this Saturday too, at 1 a.m.
Oh God.
1 in the morning.
Right.
Because it was originally supposed to be in Seoul, and then a South Korean was supposed to headline the card. I can't remember which one, but then they pulled out. So then they were like, we're not even gonna have the card in Korea now. We'll just have it at the Apex. But there's still a lot of South Korean fighters on the card, and they think that it will be mostly watched by South Koreans, so they're keeping the original broadcasting time. I think they can't get that broadcasting slot back from ESPN if they want it. That's one of the things about being on ESPN versus being on Fox Sports, is that you can call Fox Sports up and they're like, yeah, we're showing reruns of like playoffs from 2 years ago because we don't have shit to show, but ESPN has content like all the time, and it's like mainstream content. So you're staying 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. motherfuckers.
And the Bellator card's on Friday?
I think it's on Friday, yeah.
Nice.
In Russia, if I'm not mistaken.
Ooh.
Let me look it up. I don't know if there's any any crazy fights on there besides Fedor.
Yeah.
Bellator 290. Let's see here. That
Hey,
is
how you doing?
in 3 days, so that's Saturday.
Are there any fights on the horizon that you had your eye on? Like, I tend to like lose track when I have like multiple like fight weekends back to back. I'm just like, oh shit, there's other fights to do and stuff. Like,
I think that the whole landscape has kind of been shook up by Francis, and we'll see what happens with whoever wants him. But if Fury wasn't bullshitting when he said he would do 4-ounce gloves, that instantly makes it way more interesting to me. I mean, yeah, Fury. I want to see what Fury looked like in the 4-ounce gloves. It's not just about Francis having a chance. I want to see how Fury punches in the 4 ounces. Like he said, Queensberry rules, which is like bare knuckle rules, but with 4-ounce gloves.
Yeah.
In a cage.
Wow.
And he was like, and that's me kicking it up spicy. That's what Fury said. He said, did I just sell that to the world?
God bless Fury, man.
I think that fight is way more interesting than any boxer MMA fight. Just because
absolutely.
The boxer is actually willing to concede something.
Yeah.
Anything. That would be really cool to see. And Francis would obviously get his like fairy tale payday.
I think it would still look kind of like Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder, like all over again, but more like the second match, like from the get-go.
Jake's fighting Tommy soon.
Is he?
Yeah, he's fighting Tommy Fury. Yeah, as long as Fury doesn't pull out. But if Fury pulls out, do you know who the replacement is?
No.
He's waiting in the wings. They're paying him to cut weight and be in shape. Who's the craziest?
Smiling Sam Alvey?
You're not far. You're
fuck.
not far off. Who's the craziest MMA motherfucker they could drag up out of
Mike Perry?
Out of the mud?
No fucking way.
It's Mike Perry. He's
I'd
the backup.
watch Mike Perry versus Logan Paul in a heartbeat. Jake Paul, whatever. Yeah.
Jake's the slightly smaller one who's better at boxing.
Yeah.
Logan's the one who's really good at wrestling and ripping off his fans with crypto scams.
Ooh. Ouch.
I think that Tommy has a chance, but not if he fights like he's fought in any previous fight. If he fights like he's fought in any previous fight, Jake's probably going to tool him up easy.
Yeah.
But what somebody's going to have to do to beat Jake is like actually charge him down.
Yeah.
Like really charge him down because he doesn't really have really good defensive fundamentals, but he's got pretty good boxing and offensive fundamentals.
But
he's just never needed to have defense because he's never been up against somebody with real boxing offense.
Yeah.
Just somebody who's like.
This is the closest thing to a real boxing match that he has now.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure it will be. And if he wins this, it'll be Nate, probably. He'll probably get on the mic and call out Nate.
I hope not.
He's definitely not calling out somebody good, so you gotta assume it's gonna be Nate.
Oh, I hope not. What got you into martial arts? What attracted you to it?
I'd say it was the mixture of like grappling and striking.
Yeah.
And
Was there like a specific fight that got you more interested in MMA, or was it like a movie or a cartoon or?
I think all of the above.
Really?
A little bit of, like Bruce Lee, like I don't know if I've seen his documentary. On
Yeah,
his
my mom
like,
let me do martial arts and wrestling
Just, like,
because
30
of the
for
Power
30.
Rangers.
Yeah,
Bruce Lee
he
30.
was actually the father of mixed martial arts, like Jeet Kune Do, like how
The
to pull a little
philosophy
bit.
of it,
Yeah,
yeah.
he wasn't. Obviously, he was more a philosopher.
Well, because he
Yeah.
also didn't have, like, I mean, the best grapplers he got to work with were still purely focused in their one area. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu wasn't developed. Like, the Jiu-Jitsu they did know was still from judo
Kind
or
of
from
rudimentary.
like rudimentary, very much more from like catch wrestling, where it wasn't about transitions, it was about catching that submission.
He also
like,
said in an interview that like any American wrestler would probably, beat him up.
because
So,
they
I
just
mean,
knew how to have the transition
I
on
mean,
the ground of like one
he
spot.
knew
to
how
stall in one
dangerous
spot.
grappling was potentially. He just couldn't. No one back then could have quantified
Well, like
how good
the
it
scene
would be.
in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, like Bruce Lee fighting
Brad Pitt's character.
Brad is based on the Judo Jean LaBelle scuffle, which is why Judo Jean LaBelle and Bruce Lee started to work together, because Judo Jean LaBelle said, "Go ahead and try that fancy stuff. Once I grab you, it's not going to be fun." And they said that like Jean LaBelle just walked into some punches and kicks, like because he
As
wasn't
he should.
he wasn't built like because Bruce Lee was always going against guys that had never even sparred before.
Yeah.
Where Jean LaBelle was like an actual trained boxer. He was a professional wrestler. Like he
had been hit.
Like Jean LaBelle was a bit more
That's what
of
they
like
call a shoot fighter.
so.
In
Yes.
the wrestling business,
yes.
they call him a shoot
like
fighter.
Bruce Lee was the grandfather, but Jean LaBelle was still Bruce Lee's daddy on that day because of like his different background application of doing everything. So that scene is kind of like people are like, you can't make fun of him that way, but the people in Hollywood were like, well, that's what happened. Like Jean LaBelle picked the man up and threw him into the wall a couple times, just went, "Are you done now?" Like, and that was it. And like
Yeah.
Jean's like, what you do is cool, but like don't do it around people that are built different.
But definitely,
Yeah.
the philosophy that he had.
But the philosophy he had, like
regarding
yeah.
taking a little bit of something from everything and creating your own is definitely the spiritual embodiment of what mixed martial arts is all about. If there is
100%.
if there is a philosophical or spiritual embodiment of it, it's definitely that. You have to take a little bit of color from each spot on the easel to create a painting.
Yeah.
And I think that. Yeah, it was Jackie Chan for me. I don't know if it was just because my mom was a big Jackie Chan fan, but I had a ton of Jackie Chan VHS tapes when I was a kid. So I knew more about Jackie than I did about Bruce. So Bruce became a thing I got into as I got older. But definitely in my childhood, when I first started doing martial arts, it was because I had watched way too much fucking Jackie Chan.
I think that's the beauty of martial arts, like the MMA in that case. For the most part, it's chess, like a rock, paper, scissors. Like,
Yeah.
not one single martial art is gonna be the end all be all. Like, boxing might beat wrestling, but if you get like close to distance, boxing, it's done. So I think that's the beauty of the sports. Like, always embracing the suck, and you always have to be like on your A game. So yeah, I think that's what, in my opinion, MMA is the best sport ever. Like,
And when you did it for the first time, did you immediately know, like, this is for me?
literally my taekwondo like academy wasn't my dojo. Like literally it wasn't until I got to college that I actually got kicked in the face. Like literally I think that was my first
Really?
concussion.
Like I was like because you came up in a Taekwondo school in Puerto Rico, and you said
Yeah.
it was like a McDojo there.
Yeah, very common.
Man, I like because usually like you'll sometimes like see like a karate school, a traditional school in like another part of the world, and they're like, no, we don't have boards, we can't afford them, we have to use each other. Like, and it's like instead of katas, like they're kata-ing each other in the mouth.
No,
But there was
like-
none of that there. Oh wow.
It was a little bit more like for like really like childcare. Like it was just I always
The
loved,
most classic martial arts scam in the book.
Yeah, I always loved sparring, but I want to actually fight. But there's sparring like, oh, just like above the waist, nothing on the head. Like I got to a black belt without even kicking somebody in the head. So it wasn't until I got a college, like I got my brains blown out.
Because you have to go, yeah, I'm a black belt. Why'd you kick me in the face?
I'm like, they bro, I almost went crying to the wrestler. It's like, fuck, what is this? I'm a fucking black belt. I slapped myself like, fuck you. Get a hold of you.
You took your black belt off and you just threw it. You're like, I don't love you anymore.
I was gonna hang myself with a belt.
Oh no!
It was the worst thing ever.
Oh no, we just got demonetized. Oh no.
It was the worst thing ever, but yeah, like it was that moment's like, shit, I want to actually do this. Like, I don't know, I'm one of that person. Like when I'm struggling, like I want to actually do it more. Like I always felt like I have my chip on my shoulder, so that was the driving moment. Of, hey, fuck, I want to actually do this for real. And really, most of the martial artist career growth was within like that time span. I was in college, and then like, hey, I need a little bit of more grappling because, like you said, I went to a couple of Hapkido classes, but. And I was so like, oh, they grab you like this, and I felt like, oh, I'm pretty decent with grappling. Who the fuck's gonna grab you like this? Gonna grab you by the belt like this? And so that wasn't until I got to actually do BJJ that I like love mixed martial arts on like the full span of what makes martial arts.
Because you can see how deep the water.
Yeah. I went down the rabbit holes. Like
it teaches, and like you talked about, like that, it teaches you just to think differently and be like a bit more open-minded in your approach.
And embracing the suck, because from striking, I don't know, maybe it's me, but from a striking perspective, you always want to dominate. Like, I'm going to impose my will. I'm going to impose my will. But with grappling, it's like, let's go to the ground, let's see what happens. Embrace the suck. Like, I'm one of the littlest guys, so I'm going to always find myself in, like, bottom side control. So my striking brain always wants to dominate. So from grappling, it's like, let's go to the bat position, see what can happen. It's like, so I think.
Oh, I'm not getting hit in the face, so this is cool.
Yeah. You don't have to have you can show them there, like, mainly if you have the gi, you can, like, stall a little bit, but it was just embracing the suck and just get into an uncomfortable position, which at the end of the day makes you a better martial artist, because if I haven't never been in a bad position, how do I know how I'm going to react when I get myself in there? So I think that's what I think, I like more grappling, like, from mental toughness, it's a little bit better, I would say, in my opinion, than striking, because you always want to impose your own striking. In grappling, it's like, I don't know, let's see where it goes, and it's a little bit more fun. You can do more things than just striking. Like, there's so many things, amount of punches you can throw, amount of kicks, but for grappling, I'm gonna put a rubber guard.
Well, you can go, in grappling, you can go to the extremes of the suffering without suffering long-term consequences.
Yeah.
You can't just allow yourself to get head kicked in practice over and over again just to see how you respond to it. Whereas you can let the biggest, strongest guy start inside control on you just so you can get better at getting out without, you might have a little trouble sleeping on your neck that night, or you might have a little trouble swallowing your steak at Texas Roadhouse, but you're not gonna fucking go to the concussion protocol off of that. That's one thing about jiu-jitsu, is that if you are in the mood to suffer, it's easy to find out how, and then that ride home after feels a little bit different. Hopefully you feel a little bit better.
You remember the drive home.
Exactly. You get to
the mentality of being bros, like, I don't know, maybe striking, maybe it was my experience with striking, but striking, like, it's not low key like hate, but it's always like competition. It's like competition. You always want to dominate and push your will. Yeah. Which is like, as you get dominated.
And that depends on like the environment of like the striking area of like the culture that you're coming from, and like I've been around those where it's like the coach only gives attention to people fighting. Like he only gives attention to people that just want to go hard all the time. And then where like and it's like a similar mindset to like coming up in wrestling. Like you have to want to be number one at all times to be number one. And if you create that atmosphere in a striking based school, it's a whole lot of people kind of running people out the door instead of like, oh hey, I'm the more experienced guy, let me help you along. And that even sometimes means like, hey, you shouldn't jump at an experienced person that way, but then it becomes, did you learn your lesson? Okay, let's still be friends, instead of just like, I have to be better than you. And like you'll see that in some gyms where it's like, okay, here's how you learn how to fight. Fight each other. And it's like you can't always develop a good culture like that in a gym. Like you can still have a competitive culture that will always push each other, but not hurt each other. And like that's like I mean, you see my culture here. It's like I try to almost run it like a BJJ culture because
most of the people here don't even have mouth guards or cups.
Yeah.
They don't need them because they're not throwing hard enough to hurt, even if they connect.
Yeah,
most
like,
of the time. It's pretty.
I tell
it's pretty,
people like if you're
hold.
doing, but it's like then it's like different. If you're doing tech sparring with a fighter, you should still have a mouthpiece in because they're gonna be putting hands on your face, and it's like, hey, sorry, you're not moving your head. But like, yeah, you'll see like if there's a new person that doesn't have a mouthpiece in here, a fighter will still go, you're going to go at this pace right here. And then that new person sees from the experienced person like, oh man, this guy could be really fucking hitting me right now. But instead, they're showing them the ropes and showing them how to be technical, tight behind that guard, controlled in that moment. Hey, have your composure here so you don't lose it here. And it builds along a good culture where like, I've been around that. I just don't like to, I don't know. I'm not much of a bully. I don't mind hitting a bully, but like, that's a different thing. But like, for the culture, it's kind of just like everyone has to help each other. And that's usually lost sometimes environments where, let's say, like a person was like a fighter at some point, or me, like I've never been a person that calls himself a fighter. I fought, and I'm just a dude, and I'm a dude that wants people to get along. God damn it! And like you're gonna hit each other and be friends instead of just like just fuck them up and be number one. Like and like I don't like that shit.
It's like the fine balance between hyper competitive and just actually growth mindset. Like they say like rising tide lifts all boats. So that's what I like about like the gyms that have been here, like the culture and the environment. You guys, like really, you embody your philosophy. So like always welcoming everybody. So it's just that's what I love. This.
Yeah, I mean, I just like there's like, and it's like striking is like what we talked about earlier, where it's like you can always, it's very easy to make into a bad thing. Like too much of it in one way or the other can make it very much either like it becomes like a roadblock where it's like if you do just too much pad work, you're really still not doing anything hands-on. If you're just doing bad work, you're really not learning anything, but you're getting a good workout. And if you're just hard sparring on top of those, you're not really having a complete package. And it's going to kind of like hinder the growth where it's like you have to have like a solid balance of like drilling, pad work, sparring. And then
recovery.
And recovery. And like even like I tell people all the time, they're just like, I'm like, oh, is something stiff or tight? All right, let's see how to work on it. Like stretch, like relax, recover. Take a fucking day off. Like you'll never hear me like if someone's training a lot, I will tell them take a day off. Like because of that limit of like don't overdo it. Like I've seen like that tipping point of like there's that one day they overdid it while they were on red. And then like that's when the gasket blows, man.
That's what I like the trackers and like out of all this, literally I'm gonna put up a post like in the next few days, like 5 things for recovery or like always injury. Like granted you can never prevent injury, but 5 things you can do like sleep. Like again, like I've said a couple of times, but sleep is one of the most underutilized recovery tools. Nutrition.
Have you ever read Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, Dr. Matthew Walker?
I have heard of it, but I have not read it.
It's really good. It's really good. Definitely the movie. Definitely the book that made me change my sleep habits and patterns and embrace more, naps and seeing sleep as a recovery tool above all else for sure.
Yeah, and that's what also like the fitness trackers, the Whoop and like rings and all of those. Like you don't need them, but they help. Like from a little bit, you can argue more.
If you have poor sleep habits, they can help you get them on track for sure.
Yep. Do you guys dream in your sleep?
Sometimes, depending on what
depending
on what chemical substances I induce.
Okay, so like this is something that's always been like I realized I had like a sleep superpower once I started dating Talia, because like it's like I started realizing like some people don't have restful sleep, like they're just kind of like eyes closed, eyes open, which like I have felt that like if I'm on like a time crunch and I have to like take a nap, or it's like when I was in the like anyone that goes through like basic training in the military,
they can fall asleep anywhere.
Knows that, but no, it's also like your sleep doesn't feel as rested because of like stress and anxiety, and so like the 5 hours you have to sleep is just like what the fuck, that was it. But like I've found like no matter what, I've always had dreams when I sleep. Like even my naps, like even if it's a 10-minute nap, I'm in a deep dream that feels like an hour. Like in my 5 hours of sleep, I feel like I'm in there for a fucking month. Like it's weird. So I found out, I was like, oh shit, some people just don't be dreaming. And that's when like that, and I've realized like that is when the deep REM sleep is happening, is when you're deep in those dreams.
Well,
and like,
deep sleep and REM sleep are actually 2 different things.
Really?
Yeah. So that's one nice thing about the Whoop is that it actually breaks down your sleep time into what like you were doing, like what sleep cycle you were in even.
Yeah.
So like obviously you spend the most time in light, and then I spent 2 hours in deep and almost 3 hours in REM. So I probably did have some dreams, but yeah, I definitely think that like having a good like steady sleep time helps, and I think you're pretty good about that most nights. I think you know.
Well, I just know when I know I can turn my eyes off.
You're usually up like super early.
Well, I actually had to, after this happened, like I realized I had to kind of add a bit more sleep because like more sleep means like healthier
Better
brain, but like,
yeah.
but I've always been someone that could do 5 or 6 hours of sleep a night. Like my normal sleep schedule was at least like 12 or 1 until around 6 a.m. And that was just like my natural cycle, whether I'd been like working out or not, or I could fall asleep a bit earlier if I was going harder in that day. But I know like around midnight, that's when I can definitely just like lay down. Like if I lay down at 10 o'clock, then I'm just like, go the fuck to sleep, and it doesn't happen. Yeah, but then it's like, okay, midnight, done, game over. But I had to break myself out of that regular 5 a.m., 6 a.m. wake up that I've had since like elementary school. Like I've always been able to wake up early and just get going with shit.
Yeah.
But now it's like, oh man, those extra couple hours go a long way with how my head feels like throughout the day and stuff like that. So I had to make getting more sleep. Like I really focus on getting like those solid 8 hours a day or 8 hours a night, if not like 9 or more. And that's when I'm actually like going. Because now like if I get 5 or 6, then I'm like, oh no, like it's weird.
You're napping on this thing.
Yeah, and like hell, even like if I have a good bit of sleep, if my body's like, you should get some sleep, I'm like, dude, you got it. And I'm just gonna like, I just conk out when I can now, man. Too.
And there's some variance from a physiological perspective, like your cortisol levels and the circadian rhythm, like kind of fluctuates a little bit throughout the day. That's when like, yeah, like I think Andrew Huberman does a pretty good job explaining that. And I don't know if you ever heard Peter Attia.
Yes.
He also like he talks about the importance of sleep and all that, and like the fluctuations of circadian rhythm, and why some people can just wake up and go with it, and some other people like need a little bit more time to
like when I wake up, it's like I have to like get up and get my routine going. Like I don't like the feeling of like waking up and like, oh yeah, if Chance is like cuddled next to me, then I'm like, ha ha ha, meatball. Like if Talia rolls over on me and she's like a little bit more, I'm like, no, like I have to go be a man. I have to go clean the kitchen, be right back. I'm like,
floor.
Yeah. But no, like I have to, like I've always been able to like get up, go. Yeah,
I think
like
maybe adult mentality too, like always so used to the go. Like that happens also to me. Like I had so much trouble falling asleep. Like I overthink stuff so much, and it was like easy for me to get up and just work. Then like it was way easier than actually like falling asleep and just calming your brain down. So I think like you said, also having a consistent pattern of sleep, like your body already gets used to it. Like blue light filters, kind of trying to dim the lights out. Not super cold, but having your environment around you cold.
Yeah.
And also your body like lowers its body, like core temperature lowers a little bit. Helps you relax.
Oh yeah, so I turn on the ceiling fan, then I'm like, oh, there's that 2-degree difference.
Literally
done. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I sent you the UFC PI handbook. Like they talk about like sleep and how like things, how you can improve it. Like.
Yeah, they tell their athletes like sleep in a colder room, psychos. Like, don't sleep in a hot room. That's insane. Yeah, don't do that.
Yep.
So Jose, before we wrap up, if a fighter wants to work with you on recovery or anything like that, how should they reach out to you?
Also, the easiest way will be follow me on Instagram, like TheMartialArtsDoc, and like they can just shoot me at the end. I would reply pretty fast, so you can just reach me out there, and I'll try to get back as soon as I can.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate you coming on and sharing that knowledge with us today. Probably have you back sometime. Like we said, there's UFC fights this weekend. We're not going to talk about them because they suck for the most part. Derek Lewis versus Sergey Spivak. Do you have a prediction? You see how lean Derek's looking?
I saw he's looking lean.
He looks lean. He looks lean. Hopefully he'll be a little bit quicker. You know, he's getting to that point where as a heavyweight, it starts to, you know, you have like a higher age of like your prime at heavyweight.
Yeah.
He's starting to get on the other side of that.
Yeah.
So it's like I gotta kind of change my game up a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, heavyweights have their best years around 35 or so. Yeah. Like it's wild to see that. Where like the younger, springier, like smaller guys, like they're shot as soon as they get near 35.
Right. Yeah, for sure. But Spivak's a monster, so we'll see what happens.
They have
somebody get knocked out. That's
someone's getting. And they have like the Road to UFC finale on there, which I didn't know was a thing until recently.
Yeah, I don't know. what is that, like Diet Ultimate Fighter? I don't really
Yeah,
understand.
I think it's like the Ultimate Fighter kind of like because they did the Chinese UFC PI like gauntlet thing.
Oh, I see.
And I think
It's
like these are the
yeah.
best people from that, and now they're fighting each other to get a contract. So it's kind of like
Yeah, there are a
Ultimate
lot of
Fighter
like
Light.
Asian region fighters and South Korean fighters, and that's why I don't know a lot of them. They're actually getting some debuts this weekend as well. So
Yeah, it's like
just
primarily like an entire like
probably
Asian
be
undercard.
probably be a good fight to catch up on the day after, like you were saying.
Yeah, I was like,
see
let's grab
myself
some
saying-
brunch.
Yeah.
Let's recover from some fights because like we'll be at the fights in Florence.
Saturday.
On Saturday,
Going to Walker
yeah.
Vivian. So
Yeah.
so guys, until you see us next week, and until we're back here on the couch or back in the studio at Trevor's house, enjoy yourselves,